I want to welcome you to the Women in Aviation Advisory Board Alumni Town Hall Series. I know it's a mouthful, but what we're trying to do here is to bring awareness, outreach, and awareness to the general public about the work that we did as the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. As many of you may know, we spent several years coming up with really concrete reasons why there are so many barriers to women joining, staying in, or advancing in aviation and aerospace, specifically in the United States, although I think what we've found rings true around the world, and then making specific recommendations for Congress, for the FAA, for the Department of Transportation, and for industry to really improve the conditions for women and ultimately everyone in aviation and aerospace. And so I'm delighted to be the MC of this series. I'm really excited to welcome you to today's panel and want to invite you, if you have questions, to type those in to the Q&A or put those in the chat for us. We'd love to interact with you. If something rings true for you, if you agree with it, feel free to share that in the chat. Would love to hear from you. People have been a little shy in the chat, so feel free to go ahead and give us your endorsements or your questions during the broadcast today. And then afterwards, this will be available on my personal podcast as an audio, and then via YouTube as well. So we'll continue to get this out more and more as time goes on, and we have more avenues of distribution opening to us. So thrilled to have you share it with other people. We are going to hear a fascinating panel today because what's been in the news is that there's a demand for pilots. What hasn't been in the news is that there is a huge demand for workers in aviation across the board, not just pilots. I was at Airbus in Toulouse, France last week and had 3 different executives there tell me, we need people. Airbus only has test pilots. They don't have a lot of other people. So it's a very in-demand career choice right now. And today we're going to hear about a whole lot of careers that don't really have a whole lot to do with flying an airplane. And to be our moderator for today's panel is my friend, Kelly Jost. Kelly, over to you.
Thanks, Renee, for that introduction. I do love this topic of different careers in aviation, because there are so many opportunities out there that people just don't even realize. And as part of the board, you know, we talked a lot about pilots. We have had a lot of pilot discussions. A lot of us are pilots, even if you end up doing something else within aviation. For myself, I got my private pilot's license, but I'm an engineer. So as Renee said, lots of other careers available, a lot that are lesser known. For me personally, I'm working as an engineer in aviation, but not an aerospace engineer. So I don't build airplanes, I help build airports. My degree is in civil engineering, and I'm focused on the airfield and infrastructure that's needed to keep an airport running, like all of the pavements, the lighting, signage, marking, utilities, buildings, etc. So I have an amazing group of people here with me today. They each bring something different and interesting to our industry. I'm going to just do some quick introductions here. So we'll go around the screen as I can see you. And we'll just do a quick intro, your name, your career position, who you work for, and maybe your location. Anything else you want to add, go ahead. So I'm going to start with Cheryl.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm happy to be here today and participate. I am Cheryl Bush, the manager of aviation for Oakland County. We're based in Southeast Michigan. I'm based at the Oakland County International Airport, and we also have 2 other small airports in our airport system here in Oakland County. So this is a tremendous opportunity for me as an airport manager, as I've spent most of my career in general aviation, but on the fixed base operator side and managing an FBO business as well as charter. So this is a new twist for me in the last few years, and I'm really enjoying it.
Thanks, Cheryl. Let's go with Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Ward. So I'm just up the road from Cheryl. I'm in Lansing, Michigan. Been involved with the aviation industry for over 30 years as an airport planner. So while Kelly's designing the pavements and making the infrastructure, I get the luxury of telling everybody where to put it, how to design it from a planning perspective, the kind of the 2D side of the house. So I work pretty much coast to coast with projects and everything from small general aviation airports up to we've done research with the Airports Cooperative Research Program, state system planning. So really enjoy my job because I get to really touch a number of different aviation users.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Jamaal, let's go with you next.
Hello, I'm Jamaal Haltom. I am a 20-year now air traffic controller. Most of that has been in the Federal Aviation Administration. Prior to that, was an air traffic controller in the U.S. Air Force. Very proud NACA, National Air Traffic Controllers Association representative. Currently the training rep, national training rep for the National Air Traffic Controllers. And that position places me as a counterpart to the FAA's Vice President of Safety and Training. So all things training, I get to have a little part in and try to make the place a little bit better for all of us. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Megan, you're up next.
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Megan Atkins Thoben. I am the Director of Operations and Business Development here in Louisville, Kentucky at the Louisville Regional Airport Authority, and we oversee Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport and Bowman Field. And SDF, Louisville Muhammad Ali, is actually the third busiest cargo airport in North America and fifth in the world because we are home to UPS Worldport. So quite a busy position in operations. I've built the operations department here. That's one big facet of my position, but then the also other big piece that I'm currently managing is our terminal renovation effort. So the $400 million terminal renovation effort that we have embarked on here at SDF, multiple years, and all things terminal expansion, mechanical, electrical infrastructure, and the largest geothermal well field at an airport in existence be done in November.
Awesome. Thank you. And Catherine, last up.
I really appreciate the invitation to join this panel today. Never get tired of talking about the coolest job you never heard of. I am the president of the Airline Dispatchers Federation, but by day, my real job is I'm a dispatcher with Southwest Airlines here in Dallas. Been here for 16 years and still loving my job every day. And I'm happy to share about the dispatch profession for anyone who might be interested or didn't realize that they're interested. So thank you for having me.
That's a good segue, Catherine. I'm going to start with you for the first question because I've been in aviation for 20 years, and I just learned about dispatchers just at the Women in Aviation conference last year. I didn't really understand what they did. I didn't know anything about it. So I'm just going to go around the room again, start with you, Catherine. I think a lot of people know they love aviation, but they may not know exactly where they fit in. So it's good to know about these other jobs and what you like about it. So if you could just tell us a little bit about what you do, what a dispatcher does, and what you like about your job.
All right. Well, I am very happy to do that. And as I mentioned, I can go on about it at great length. So feel free to cut me off when you need to move on, but I'll try to keep it brief. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions, of course. So as an FAA certificated aircraft dispatcher, I share joint responsibility with the pilot in command for each flight. So I will prepare a dispatch release that is required for each flight. And this document has a number of required elements such as routing, fuel load, any limitations, takeoff and destination alternates, weather, and any other details about the plan for a particular flight on a particular day. This will include mechanical issues with the aircraft because airplanes fly with things wrong with them every day. And it's my job to determine if those maintenance items will have any impact on my plan. If it's a coffee maker or an overhead bin, that airplane can probably safely execute any mission. But if it's an item that restricts the aircraft from operating in icing conditions, I have to first determine if icing is a hazard for this flight. And if so, can I route to avoid it, or do I have to ask for another airplane? So then I will file this plan with ATC and send it to the captain. The captain will sign this release indicating his or her agreement with the plan. If he or she wants any changes, we will have a conversation and come to agreement before that flight departs. Then while the flight is en route, the crew and I need to be able to communicate any changes or developments, things like weather, turbulence, passenger and mechanical issues. Most of that communication occurs over ACARS, essentially text messaging the crew, but will often come up on the radio as well. And so I need to be able to work with the pilot in command and that crew and that flight from the earliest planning stages all the way to when they are blocked in and completed that flight. So we are both strategic in the planning part of our jobs and tactical in the flight following and the operational side. So it's and we're doing all of those things at the same time. So it can be pretty exciting. I will say the job is predominantly, like my workflow is predicated on weather. Quite honestly, if there's weather in my sector, I'm going to be busy. If there's weather at my airports and we're having diversions and things, I'm going to have a much busier day. If it's a gorgeous Cavu perfect day, I can still have issues come up. There's other things, of course, maintenance and passenger issues, but I'll probably have an easier day that day. But anyway, I will stop myself there and let someone else talk, and be happy to answer any questions, because I really do love this profession, and I hope I can get someone else excited about it as well. Thank you.
Follow-up question to that, Catherine. Where do you physically work?
Okay. I work, so all of the major airlines and most of the regionals have an operations center, and their dispatchers will work from that operations center. So I am in an office with other dispatchers, with crew schedulers, with maintenance controllers, with network planners. So I have all of these resources at my fingertips. So it's very helpful to have SMEs on any number of topics that might come up, and support for what I'm doing. So
Great. Thank you. Perfect. Megan, we'll go with you next. Let's hear about your job and what you like about it.
Well, first, I got to say that is the best description of a dispatcher that I have ever heard. And that makes me want to go back to school, be a dispatcher, because they are really, 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 really cool. And one thing that's really cool about dispatchers too. So being in Louisville and being at UPS Worldport, when I was an intern here back in college, I got a chance to go sit with a dispatcher for UPS over at their Global Operations Center. And it was during the Icelandic volcanoes, and it was during all that ash rain that was happening across the Atlantic and the huge disruption of everybody going transatlantic. And I sat with a dispatcher, and I promise you 6+ hours went by, and it was like nothing. I was so zoned into what they were doing. It was one of the most fascinating experiences of my life. So kudos to Catherine. That's really, really, really cool job. Yeah, it's and then you don't get to talk to many dispatchers, and what they get to do is just really, it's really amazing, all the resources they bring together to make a safe flight. So very cool, Catherine. Yeah, so UPS is obviously a big part of my life here in Louisville, being home to Worldport, but being in operations has really been my passion from the beginning, because like so many of us, we get into aviation for the airplanes. We love the airplanes. We want to be by the airplanes. We might want to fly them. I thought I wanted to fly them, but as you all will quickly learn, I am a talkative person, and airplanes don't talk back. So I like people. I really, really like the person interaction, and I love trying to infect other people with my passion for aviation. And it felt like probably the person I would be flying with all the time, they probably already like aviation a lot too, since they're sitting next to me. So may not be the best use of my personality. So after getting my private pilot certificate, I started looking into airports and being in Kentucky. I went to school in Kentucky, found an aviation program in Kentucky, knowing that's what I really wanted to do, and had an airport close to my school where I was able to just get my foot in the door with whatever job popped up. And at that point, it was the info desk. It was just answering phones and talking to passengers and getting the ins and outs of the day-to-day operations of an airport, and getting to talk to the leadership leadership while I was there about how they all got to their respective roles. I mean, you realize that airports are like a small city. You've got those that start in some of those respective roles like engineering or like finance and maintenance, and then they all come together to make an airport run. And I just thought that was really cool. So I really wanted to find what could I do within an airport that was still rooted in being a subject matter expert on airplanes. And that's where operations kind of came into play. So started at that airport in Lexington, Kentucky, and got to move on to an airport in Columbia, South Carolina. And now I'm here in Louisville, which happens to be my hometown. Something else I rarely hear of, where you actually get to make your way back home in aviation. A lot of us end up moving around, but my job in operations and being close to the airplanes, being close to the action is really, really conducive to my personality. I don't sit still. I don't stop talking. I don't stop moving, and I'm always excited. And so I feel like every day is different. Every day is a new challenge. Every day just brings something different. And the impact that our airports have on our cities is just incredible. And so to say that I get to play a small part in what really drives our entire city, the business development side of my job in running our terminal improvement program, being someone that's very passionate about this airport because I'm from here, I was born and raised here. I know what it's like to travel in and out of our airport. So being the person leading some of those improvements from that perspective is really, really cool to me. And then also just air service development and bringing new flights, getting to tell the story of our city to airlines and tell them, why we could support a specific service because we have particular industry here, or we have growth here, or we've never gotten to go here, and we've always wanted to, but we never were able to because we didn't have the flights. All of those stories are really, really important to an airline when you're trying to pitch service, and all of that ends up being very, very impactful to your city, all the while being close to the thing that I started out loving the most, which was just the airplane, which connects the entire world and all the people in it. So that's why I love what I do. I love being in operations, love being at airports, and hope to continue moving up in the same way.
Very cool. And I can always feel your energy, Megan. I love it.
Coming through the screen at you. I just want to give you a hug.
For sure. I do have a question. This is for Catherine. How has the pilot, mechanic, and flight attendant shortage affected dispatch?
We have a lot of challenges, and it's not. It's pretty universal right now. It's not just pilots and flight attendants and mechanics. It's cooks and servers and air traffic controllers and every profession, anything you encounter these days. There's a struggle. There's certainly a big change going on in our entire country, and coming out of COVID. I can tell you that we've hired a lot of dispatchers in the last few years, and some of their training, and Jamaal might be able to relate to this too, is that during the COVID times, we had fewer people on our airplanes. So our payload, our passenger load was much lighter, which meant I could put a lot more fuel on the airplane. And air traffic controllers, because there were fewer flights in the air, had the luxury of a little more airspace, a little more wiggle room for flights to hold. So it was, in a way, a little bit easier to do my job because I had the luxury of fuel and the luxury of ATC being able to be more flexible with our flights. So some of the training that folks got during that time is not real world that we're experiencing now, where people are back in the airplanes and the airplanes are full, so we can't carry quite as much gas, and the skies are full, so controllers don't have as many options, and it's just become much more labor intensive. Our workload has escalated dramatically. And then with the passenger challenges, because we're all here to serve our customers, it's heartbreaking when we have all these restrictions or limitations and concerns coming to play all at the same time. It's been a challenging time for the folks working at the airlines and for the folks that are at the stations and in the airports that have to share less than ideal news about your flight being delayed or canceled. It's hard. It truly is. So I always want to reach out to those folks because the traveling public that doesn't always understand all these intricacies and all these things that come into play. And, with Part 117 restrictions for pilots' duty days and rest periods, it's really challenging for airlines to flex and adapt and to accommodate that in the best way possible. But I assure you, we are trying really hard. But yeah, it's tough. And that staffing problem extends to on the ramp and in the airport as well. So I don't think I answered your question, but I did acknowledge that it's a real problem.
I think you did well. Let's keep going through learning about some of these jobs. Let's go with Cheryl. Talk about your position and what you like about it.
Sure. Well, I've been in aviation for a little over 40 years, so it has really evolved throughout my career. But I can agree with Megan that every day is new, diverse, and exciting. I have always said it's never felt like a job to work in aviation because I can't wait to get up in the morning and come to my airport. I love the people in aviation. The networking is incredible, the mentorship. If someone has a desire about a potential career in aviation, virtually anyone that you bump into is willing to sit down and talk to you about their story, their entry into the field, make introductions, give a day of experience to someone that might have interest. And that networking and that support runs from everything in mentoring, vendor selections or hiring questions or management decisions. There's just a wealth of support, and that's a small community that we have in aviation that I know a lot of other industries don't enjoy to that extent. My career, as I mentioned earlier, I started out in the fixed base operation side. And so we're a general aviation airport here. I've been on this airport, general aviation airport, most of my career. And we are still the second busiest airport in the state of Michigan. So we have a lot of activity. In the FBO side, I was working with pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, aircraft sales personnel, interior refurbishers, flight attendants, the full gamut of services to an individual that from the point of either acquiring an airplane or reserving a charter flight to putting that airplane into operation, selecting their crews, dispatching them around the world. So it was 100% operations on that side of it. We were also involved in the fuel sales to the various airports, airplanes that are based on our field here. I transitioned over to the airport side about 5 years ago, which was really fun for me because call it maybe the twilight of my career, but after about 35 years, I had an opportunity to get involved in airport operations. And so again, it kept me in the field that I love so much, but it showed me the aviation industry from a little different perspective. And so now I sit on the other side of the table where when I was a tenant on an airport looking for how can my airports support me, now I have to have those answers. So my job entails keeping the folks on the airport safe and keeping the airport efficient, providing adequate staffing, making sure that staff has the equipment that they need, whether it be vehicles or parts to make repairs on the airport. We're responsible for lighting and pavement conditions and keeping the runways clear during inclement weather and making sure that approaches into the airport are clear and safe. That's a major part of our maintenance side. I'm also involved with the financial portion of running the airport, involved in creating the budgets, holding ourselves accountable to that budget, developing capital improvement plans, seeking out grants, and ensuring that we've got the financial wherewithal to keep our airport safe and pristine. I'm also a liaison to the public, so I speak to a lot of community events, folks that are interested in what happens at the airport, want to learn more about the economic driver that the airport is to the community. And I'm also involved with the engineers like Kelly in airport planning, developing a layout plan, construction projects, and land acquisition, easements. It is a very, very diverse and dynamic environment, which really makes it very exciting for me. I don't want to take too much time, but that's a high level view of where I spend most of my time. I guess I should also add that there's a lot of regulatory portions to my job in working with the FAA, making sure that we're adhering to our regulations. We're a Part 139 airport, which is essentially the same regulations that a commercial airport might operate under, with some variations, and also work with the state of Michigan and the local county officials. So that's another big portion of my job.
A lot to deal with, Cheryl.
Yeah, there is a lot going on, but it makes it fun too.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's hear from Stephanie next.
Thanks, Kelly. You know, I like to think that I'm a pretty energetic person, but I'm going to take a second seat here to Megan. That was awesome, Megan. Could I have half of that energy that you've got? Yeah, excellent. And I love the CAE in the background there. Nice job. Much like some of the others, you know, my job is someone that I often get lots of, I call them, you know, the owl blink, where they're like, that's a thing, that's a career. You know, I had to be careful. I travel a lot professionally because of my job. And so I've constantly got my window seat and my nose pressed against the window, and I'm checking out every airport as we're on taxiing. And I've made a few of my seatmates nervous because they'll, you know, I'm usually pressed up against the window and like, is everything okay? And I'm like, well, I work in airports, I design airports, so I'm always checking them out. And then I have to hear about every horrible thing that's ever happened on every trip they've ever had. It's never the good stuff. I never get, oh my gosh, this airport is the best. It's, well, I had the worst experience at fill in the blank. And so I've decided I either have to stop putting my nose against the window, or I have to tell them a different career path. And so we're not going to engage in conversation. But that leads into what I do. So I fell into this career quite by accident. I thought I would be a community planner. That's what my degree is in urban planning, but had the luxury of a small local firm back when I was graduating from Michigan State University. They were looking for a entry-level planner. And so I had the luxury of getting that position, and have now been doing that for 30 years. And much like Megan described her job, and Cheryl, of not doing the same thing every day, I do the same thing, that I can be working on a small general aviation airport today and figuring out, do they need a runway extension, or where should they put a T hangar, clear up to you know, Detroit Metro. What do we do at Metro? I do a lot of work with state agencies, so we're doing system planning. So we're looking at an entire state's grouping of airports. So for example, we're working in Virginia right now. They have over 60 state airports, and we're looking at how do they all fit together? What are the gaps that they have in the system that we need to adequately serve the flying public? And that could be, do they need weather reporting? Do they need runway extensions? Is there a demand for T hangars? And how do we leverage that and funding across the system? And we also do a lot of work with environmental projects. So, you know, every project that's going to get federal funding, often a lot of state funding, those have to have environmental clearance of some sort. So we do a lot related to that. Land acquisition, obstruction removal, you name it. Most of that comes through my group as a planning department. So we put a lot of the 2D lines on paper, your airport layout plan. We do all of that behind the scenes planning. So we get it put on paper, and then we turn it over to the engineers like Kelly and say, all right, you guys go build it, make it happen. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I don't do the same thing 2 days in a row. I rarely do the same thing for 20 minutes in a row, but it's a great exposure. But it's amazing to me how often we have that. Nobody understands that that's even a career. I am a consultant, but many of the larger airports, have planners on staff. A lot of state departments, state aeronautics divisions have planners in their group. So there are plenty of opportunities for that as a career path, and trying to get that information out. One of the things that I know is pretty interesting, and I love the diversity of this panel, is the research that we did for ACRP Report 202, which is about aviation education, talked exactly about what this is about in terms of all the different career paths that are out there, and how you could take any of us that are sitting here on this call today, and we could be in a private context. Catherine's position, yeah, she's with one of the major airlines, but she could be with a, private company doing flight dispatch. Megan's, everything from Louisville down to the small GA where you don't have a staff, you are the full staff. Kelly and I, what we do, we could be at a consulting firm like we are, or a state agency, the federal agency. And it's just amazing, that diversity that I think is out there. And many people don't realize that the depth of the number of professions, and certainly then even the diversity of, and what career path could it be that you're in it. So that's one of the reasons I really love what I do, that it's gives me the opportunity to work with folks such as all of yourself in various roles and capacities, and really enjoy what I get to do on a daily basis. Not with as much enthusiasm as Megan, but I try. Maybe when I was younger.
Thanks, Stephanie. And I am also one of those people that puts my face up against the window, and I always want to see what's going on. And my kids know that mom gets the window seat. There's no arguing about it. I always get it. And I will also say about the planning side, Stephanie, it was funny because when we were putting the report together, we had a section about a bunch of different careers, and we cited an FAA source, and there was nothing in there about planning. And I asked about adding that, and we couldn't add it because we were citing this FAA source. It wasn't included. So I feel like that is a gap, that's something we need to let people know, that that's an opportunity, and it's something that you can do if you want to be in aviation. So thank you for explaining that. I think it's another fascinating career. And I think, Jamaal, you're up last year to explain your job and what you like about it.
Sure, thank you. I guess I sit by the window also, but differently, as I go to sleep almost immediately, because I have tremendous faith in what the air traffic controllers do. I guess initially just start off what we're not. We're not the marshalers, with tremendous respect to what they do, but that's not what an air traffic controller is. And we're not, despite what you might hear at the airport, the person responsible for your delays, usually. So air traffic controllers are broken down into 3 different specialties for it when including flight service. But our job is to choreograph the skies. We take an airplane from the gate, when they back away from the gate, all the way to when they land and go to the gate at their destination airport. And we work all things in between. With FAA regulations, we ensure that all airplanes are either separated vertically or with miles and trail to ensure that everyone gets to their destination safely. The beauty of air traffic control is, much like everyone else here has said, is it changes daily. There are no 2 days that are alike. It's affected greatly by weather. We have the challenges of ensuring that we still maintain those separation standards when the weather is there. And we take tremendous pride in getting people and commerce to their destination in a safe and expeditious manner. I like to think that we make the world a small place. We service extremely small municipalities, and we service giant airports. I work personally at Las Vegas Airport. We're the 6th busiest airport in the country, depending, sometimes 8th, between 6th and 8th. really extreme helicopter operation, and we have to work in really proximity to major airlines and keep everyone happy and involved in the strip. And that happens all over the country in air traffic control, is making sure that, you know, everyone that gets on an airplane is the most important person to the world and the world to themselves, and they want to just get to their destination. And we love to make sure that happens, but we have to make sure that it occurs in a really safe manner. So it's an outstanding profession that offers mobility, it offers progression, it offers a sense of pride every day when you go home. It's one of those professions when you tell people what you do, it usually starts a lot of interest. So on an airplane, you have to be very careful as to whether or not you're willing to spend your entire time explaining, again, like Stephanie did, every incident that has occurred to anyone in their life. But we love the profession, and I'm really happy to be able to talk about it with you all.
Awesome, thank you. And I love that view from the tower. It's the best. All right, we're gonna go back to Catherine. And I know we've kind of talked about some of the twists and turns that people have taken in their careers, but I always think it's interesting to find out how people got into aviation in the first place. Some people, you know, thought they wanted to be a pilot or, you know, had some interest. They went to the airport and saw something they liked and thought they might want to get into that. But I think that's always an interesting question, is how did you get into aviation? Did you just fall into it? Was it something you wanted to do as a kid? So Catherine, let's start with you.
Well, thank you. So I did not discover the wonderful world of aviation until I was an old lady. So very few of us grew up knowing that we wanted to be an aircraft dispatcher. We all got here some other way, whether it be through flying or ATC or meteorology or some other aviation career. But for me, I had a whole different life. I was working in food and beverage. I was managing a restaurant, but I'd always wanted to get my private pilot license, my certificate. And, you know, I always thought one day I'll have the time and money to do this. And I clipped the Learn to Fly ad from my newspaper for the local little airport. Shout out to Leonapolis Airport. And I stuck that on my refrigerator. And it got old and yellowed and crinkly. And when I moved, I took that ad and I stuck it to my new refrigerator. And then one day I just realized that I will not have the time and money, and I just needed to make it happen. So I walked into the pilot shack at Lee Airport and asked if anyone could help me. And as we talked about earlier, the aviation community, in particular the GA community, just grabbed me up. And that weekend I was in my first small airplane ever and went to the AOPA fly-in. And the next month I was camping under the wing at Oshkosh. So I got the aviation bug pretty bad. And I soon started looking for an aviation career to support my recreational flying. So my sister was a Miami Center controller, and she's the one that suggested I look into dispatch. Even she wasn't entirely sure what it was, but she thought it might be a good fit. So I did just that, and I was awarded a scholarship to dispatch school through the Airline Dispatchers Federation at a Women in Aviation conference. And I quit my job and I flew out of a deserted airport at BWI on September 14th, 2001, wondering what have I just done? But school was paid for. I had already quit my job, and I just put one foot in front of the other and proceeded with the plan. I knew I wanted to work at Southwest Airlines at the time, and Southwest only hired internal candidates into the dispatch office. So I went home and I applied for any job until I got hired into a ground ops position, which I also loved, by the way, and started applying for dispatch. And 4 years later, finally landed my dream job. So yeah, it's we all came a different route. I work with people who were going through the air traffic control path and then decided to make a switch. People that started flying and realized that there were benefits of that career that didn't fit their lifestyle, and then and came to dispatch, and a lot of folks meteorology through meteorology school and aviation meteorology found dispatch. And then, a lot of people just came up through the airline working different jobs and found their way to our office.
Very cool. Now we just have to figure out how to get little kids to say, I want to be a dispatcher when I grow up.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, people, it's just such a little known career. And, like a lot of these things, whatever your interest is, there's an aviation job for you. And I think this panel is demonstrating that beautifully. If it's construction, or if it's design, or if it's communications, or no matter what you want to do, there is an aviation career for you. But to put it in a little bit of perspective, for dispatchers that are exercising the rights and responsibilities of their certificate, there's less than 5,000 in the country. So that's why you don't know us, but we're here.
That's a low number, definitely. All right, thanks, Catherine. Let's go to Megan. How did you get into aviation?
Well, so I got to say, between Catherine and Jamaal, and actually Stephanie too, and a little bit of Kelly, but Kelly, I don't have an engineer brain, so I don't think I was ever quite at engineer level. But like every single one of those jobs, at some point I wanted, like every single one. Like the dispatcher thing, just like Catherine said, if you are interested, if you just like airplanes, if you think airplanes are cool and they're fun to be around, I mean, any one of these things that all of you all do are fun and neat and impactful, and we all connect with one another. I decide that I got to do some pavement repair over in Louisville on our long runway on a rainy day, and all of a sudden Catherine can't send the Southwest flight that she was sending from Baltimore down here to land and with the fuel that it had, or with she's so, I mean, I'm sure I've impacted all of you all in some way or another, and vice versa. So it's so cool how it all connects. But I just like everybody, just like Catherine too, like we get it bit by the bug somehow, and it's usually from someone or something. And for me, it was just my dad. He loved to fly just as a private pilot, and he got his private pilot certificate back in the 70s. I actually have his hanging up on my wall back there. I have his original laminated little private pilot certificate. I think it says like 1978 was when it was issued to him. So just flying with him as a little kid, we had a little 172 out at Bowman Field here in Louisville that I now oversee. And so we would go and fly to a small airport pretty much every single weekend, trying to just cover them all, just make it there. And if there was a place to have dinner, go have dinner. And then fly home. And I have two older brothers, and I was the only one that was really interested and thought it was really cool to fly. The other two just didn't really give it much thought, and I was the only one that went on to fly myself. And no cooler day have I had than when my dad got to see me solo at Bowman Field, and he always keeps an air-to-ground radio in the back of his Jeep. So every touch and go I would do, he'd go, "Great job, looks great, that was a greaser," every single one. So that was a really, really cool moment for me. But just love and his passion, and always just wanting to make him proud. And I'm a lot like my mom in all the other ways, but it's really cool for me to say it's because of my dad that I fell in love with aviation, and I've had such success in aviation.
Love it. Great story. Cheryl, we're going to go next to you. How did you end up in aviation?
Well, I had no exposure to aviation whatsoever. I went to school with an eye toward business management, and happened to move out to a small community out in Waterford, Michigan, which, unbeknownst to me, I drove by and there was this nice little active small general aviation airport right in my neighborhood. And I just thought, wow, how cool would that be to work at an airport? And I love to travel, although it had nothing to do with any job I've ever had. I just thought it would really be fun, and maybe I'll learn how to fly too. So I applied for a part-time sales secretary position back when they had secretaries in the early days. And from the moment I walked into that job, I just could not get enough. I wanted to learn every job at the company. I wanted to have some exposure to all facets of it. And I became an office manager on the admin side, and then I got involved in charter sales and sold flights and became a charter manager, and eventually took some more responsibilities on and ended up a vice president of this company after about 10 years there. And after about 15, I became actually president of this fixed base operation, and pulled together an incredible team. And we accomplished a lot of really unique programs while I was in that tenure. But the exposure was phenomenal. I had a chance to be exposed to all sides of the business. And I have to say, I had an incredible mentor. The owner of the company really took my hand and showed me the ropes. And when I would say, boy, I can't do that. I'm not a pilot, or I'm not a mechanic. How can I lead this company? And he would come back and say to me, the contribution that you make to this business is something unique and different from what we need, what the company needs in terms of a pilot's role or a mechanic's role. And your management, marketing, and people skills, and on lend a different contribution to the business. And so it was an unlikely career selection, but as soon as I became active in the business, I knew it would be a career for life for me. And I'm still enjoying it all these years later. So
yeah, and that mentoring is important. That was part of our report as well, was how important having those mentors are.
Yes.
To push you along and give you that little encouragement and kind of stretch yourself a little bit.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. We've got Jamaal and Stephanie, right? Have not talked yet. Let's go, Jamaal, about getting into aviation.
Well, my story is not quite the same as, I was not an aviation buff growing up by any stretch of the imagination. I actually was starting to annoy my mother doing my gap year after high school was turning into 2. And she thought I should probably go see a recruiter for the Air Force. So I did that. Originally wanting to be in law enforcement in the Air Force, and a recruiter kind of steered me toward air traffic control. Quite frankly, he showed me the pay for air traffic controllers on the outside post-military career, but he sold me on telling me that it was a team sport. Being someone that grew up enjoying sports a lot, I thought that was something that really interested me, and it turned out to be just that. It is honestly the ultimate team sport. You can't do air traffic control by yourself. You can't choreograph the 70,000 flights a day that we have to by yourself. So it continually gives me that feeling of being back in the locker room, and the men and women that do the job do it in with such grace and do it in such a manner that it's almost seamless, that we are a giant team. An airplane leaving Los Angeles going to New York via communication by radio and radar coverage probably interacts with upwards of 30 air traffic controllers. It's very seamless to the public, often seamless to a pilot. But that team feel is what drew me to air traffic control and kept me wanting to be in the profession and make the profession better. So I would say the Air Force is an excellent avenue. For those who are looking at it, different avenues, you can just test. When there's open bids, you can test and apply for the government job, the position of air traffic controller, or you can go to a CTI school. There are colleges across the country that specialize in air traffic control. So whatever path you take, if you're someone that enjoys being part of a team that's really important, it's a great profession.
Great. Thank you, Jamaal. Stephanie, I think you're the last one.
Last but not least, right? So Jamaal teed it up great. I started down the Air Force path. I grew up over in the thumb of Michigan and was under one of the flight paths between all of our military bases here. So a lot of activity going out of Selfridge Air Force Base to some of our northern bases. And so I said maybe I breathed too much emissions being in the flight path over the years, but had a love for it. And so I had hoped to be an astronaut. I was, date myself here, the space shuttle program was coming into its fruition, and thought that would be awesome. I would love to be on a space shuttle mission. So found out the best way to do that was through the Air Force, trying to become an Air Force pilot and then transitioning into mission specialist, et cetera. So big goals. They got dashed by the combination of calculus and my eyesight. Both of them said, well, from an Air Force perspective, you're not going to end up in the left seat in any of our jets. Sorry. So I took a different path. So I had gotten my my private pilot's license at 16 out of a little strip in Michigan. So figured, well, since I can't do that professionally, it wasn't the seat I wanted through the Air Force, I'll just fly recreationally. So I had a complete 180 change in career paths. I had been an electrical engineering major, that was what I was going to do, follow into the Air Force was electrical engineering. And instead went to, much like Megan, found out I'm much more of a people person than I thought I was. I thought I was an engineer. I am not an engineer, much bigger of a people person. And so took one of the career placement tests, and it kept saying urban planning. And I had never heard, much like, people don't know about a dispatcher. I didn't know what the heck an urban planner was at 18. So went to MSU, career placement, said, what's this urban planning thing? They said, gosh, we've got a career path in that. We've got a degree. Great. So I, like I said earlier, thought I would be a community planner, designing, master plans for cities and counties and that sort of thing. And luckily was picked up 3 months before I graduate by a local engineering firm who did airports, who said, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities because we're not doing the planning. And 30 years later, I'm still here doing it. So trying to carry the conversation out there. So fortunately, don't fly privately anymore. Had to give that up because I'm just don't have enough time, enough bandwidth to be proficient enough to be safe. So don't do that, but certainly sing the praises of it and the gospel that we need to get more people back into it. Just seeing this group is exciting for me because I can remember very early in my career that I would go into a conference and there might be one, maybe two other females in the restroom. That was always my gauge of how are we doing as a women in aviation. If the bathroom's busy and it's not just the attendant who might be cleaning something while she's there, that we now have great representation or greater representation than we used to. I can think, Cheryl, this will probably take you back, Del Fairbanks from Detroit and I would be hanging out in the bathroom together for a while. And that would be it. And now there's a plethora of us there that I think really changes the dynamic, which is very exciting to see.
That is a perfect segue, Stephanie. It's like you read my mind because this is Women in Aviation Advisory Board Alumni panel, and we're talking about women in aviation. So I'm just going to throw this out to the group. We've only got about 8 minutes left. I could talk to this group all day long. Your stories are all fascinating, and I would love to pick your brains more. But I am going to go with the question, what advice do you have for women that are in a male-dominated industry in order to, get through and do the things they want to do and feel like they're contributing? Just going to throw it out to the group. If a couple of people have answers, then feel free to just jump right in.
Well, I can start us off. I have been the only woman in the room at aviation meetings for most of my career. But the thought never really crosses my mind that I'm the only woman in the room. I don't really look at it as a gender role or a gender issue. And I think that's probably helped me that I wasn't intimidated by being that only woman in the room. And I was fortunate enough to work with people that I had earned their respect. And so I could hold my own in those positions. but I'm so thrilled to see that there are more women in aviation and that they are willing to take maybe a risk that might be perceived, and hopefully learn quickly that if you can build that self-confidence in yourself, that it really isn't, gender really doesn't play a role for the most part. And I feel like as a woman, I also have something unique to lend to any conversation in business that maybe sometimes isn't always the first to come to mind to the opposite gender in the room. So that's what spurs me on.
Yeah, I would say being a minority, a part of a minority group myself, is we know that we have to kick the door down sometimes, and we in air traffic control absolutely need women. We know for a fact, being a part of the union, that having a diversity of ideas and thoughts makes us all better, and we can't have that specifically without having women present. We have things such as our paid parental leave improvements, our nursing mothers, provisions in our contract, that without women being present and really pushing for those things wouldn't have existed, and it wouldn't exist for air traffic controllers. So take the charge. Understand that if you're in any profession and you're a minority of any type, that you're attempting to make it better for those that come after you, and without people being willing to put themselves out there, and knowing that when you put yourself out there, that you do, as Cheryl just said, have great ideas. You're not a second-class citizen in any stretch or by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll repeat it: you make the professions better. You make aviation as a whole better, and we need all different types, and most certainly we need women.
Jamaal's gonna be very hard to follow because that was beautiful, and I feel like we should put that on a billboard somewhere. So thank you. That was really, really awesome of you to say. But bouncing off of what Cheryl said too, and Kelly and I have talked about this at length too, when we're in a room, when women are in a room, and we're typically the minority, but women, I feel like, have the ability to think beyond in a way that is sometimes the only thought process that's kind of going on in a situation like that, where you're speaking about a problem and everyone else is kind of dealing with the problem, but it's usually the woman in the room that's thinking deeper than that problem and thinking not just how do we solve it now, but how do we solve it for good, and how do we solve other problems maybe that we're not talking about that are related to that. And that's a lot of thought. That's a lot going on in our brains. That's a lot of speaking up to do, and understand and know that is your value and that is your worth, and don't be afraid to speak to that length, to get deeper like that, even when everybody else is just kind of getting done with what the problem is at hand. Understand that is a really valuable thing that we bring to the table, to situations, to problems, that we always think deeper, and that's needed. Just that's the diverse part of us, and of having a diverse work group, is that different way of that different perspective, that different looking at it. So one of my favorite nav aid in aviation, here's the nerd, my favorite nav aid is the Pappies. Anytime I tell people about my love for the Pappies, they always roll their eyes at me, but I'm like, it's a life applicability thing. It's all about perspective. Nothing's changing about the Pappy. The Pappy is the Pappy, but it depends on how you're looking at it. It depends on what you see. So it's always about perspective. We bring a very unique perspective. And so never silence that. Always follow that through and make it known.
I love it. Love the Pappy too. And that's a great ending. We're wrapping up on time here. Like I said, I could talk to all of you all day long. And I will just second what you guys said about just speaking up, because that different perspective is so important. And it took me a while to figure that out and to be okay with being a different voice. So that's what I would say. My advice to people would be, use that voice, speak your truth, speak what you're thinking, ask questions. And I think the aviation industry will be better for it. So Renee, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat that I missed or any wrap up you want to do in the last couple minutes here.
I didn't see any more questions, Kelly, but thank you so much for organizing this panel. I looked up and couldn't realize that 50 minutes had already gone by. Like you, I could have listened for another several hours, and I hope that we can continue having panels and highlighting jobs in aviation that aren't in the movies necessarily. I really enjoyed hearing some of the things behind the scenes that really make it safe for us to fly all over the world. It's unbelievable. Thank you so much to each of you panelists who've been here. I just want to thank the listeners who are watching this either live or in recording. If you would like to get updates on future town hall meetings, if you would text WIAAB to the number 33777, you'll get an email ahead of time and then a text message right before the town hall starts, and we can include you in future discussions. Thanks so much, Kelly. Thank you. Thanks so much to the panelists. We appreciate all of you.